She forgot to disconnect her phone from the TV, and I found out she was texting with our chef. It was one of those still evenings where the air felt heavy but calm, and everything in the house moved a little slower than usual. I was on the couch, feet stretched out, my phone in one hand, the other resting on the armrest as the faint light from the TV flickered across the room. She sat beside me, curled into her favorite corner of the sofa with her legs tucked under a blanket, scrolling through something on her phone like she usually did. It was one of our quiet nights. No arguments, no tension, just the kind of silence that becomes so routine you stop noticing it. She'd been browsing cooking tutorials, maybe some design video, or an event planning reel. She was always doing that, researching ideas for the next dinner, the next tablescape, the next wine pairing she wanted to request from our chef. She liked things to be perfect when we hosted, said details mattered more than people realized, and she often sent links to the staff for inspiration. That night, she tapped a few things and casually cast her phone screen to the smart TV, something she did all the time when she wanted a better view. A food styling video came up. Bright colors, soft music, and a host arranging small bites onto a marble platter. She leaned in for a bit, then relaxed back again, watching with mild interest. Nothing unusual. I stayed quiet, letting the background noise settle around us like a warm fog. Then she said something about going to grab her robe or check the dryer. I wasn't really paying attention. She walked off into the back hall, phone still in her hand. The video on the TV paused briefly, then blinked out. I figured she'd disconnected the screen share or switched apps. I didn't move, just kept half scrolling through headlines I wasn't reading, too relaxed to care. A few seconds passed. Then the TV flickered back on, but it wasn't a video this time. It was her phone's home screen. She hadn't ended the mirroring session. I was about to get up and call to her, let her know she left it running, when the screen changed again. A messaging app opened. No notification sounds. Just her screen, blown up across our wall like a private window being flung open. At first, I assumed it was a friend, maybe her sister, maybe a grocery list update. But then I saw the name at the top of the thread. Not hidden, not disguised. It was his name. Our chef. The man who worked in our kitchen nearly every day. The one she always pretended to be annoyed with. She'd roll her eyes when he brought out a dish, complain that he didn't understand her palate, say he was boring, too clinical, not creative enough. She never complimented him in front of me, never spoke to him unless she had to. And now her messages to him were right there in front of me. I froze. The screen filled with her words. Not casual, not professional, not anything that could be mistaken for innocent. There were sentences you can't unsee. Phrases that shift your entire reality in less than a second. She told him she missed their last time together. Said she couldn't stop thinking about their last moment in the kitchen last time I was gone. Told him to save some energy for her when the party ended. My chest tightened. My hands didn't move. Another message loaded. She said the cleaning lady had almost walked in, and next time they had to be quicker. I was still staring, breath shallow, trying to process what I was seeing when a picture appeared, her hand wrapped in what looked like his apron strings, taken at a low angle in our kitchen, right where he usually stood to plate dessert. Another message followed, thanking him for the wine and saying next time he should make it more personal. I reached for my phone without thinking. My fingers moved slow but steady. I opened the camera, raised it, and started snapping photos of the screen. One, then another, then another. Message after message, line after line. Each one a thread in a rope that was tightening around my neck. She was still in the other room, humming faintly, doing something completely mundane, completely ordinary. Meanwhile, on the screen I was reading the true version of her, one I'd never met before. There was nothing in the messages about food. Nothing about menu plans or dietary preferences. Nothing about weekend specials. Just her words. Intimate. Unapologetic. Rehearsed in a way that made it clear this wasn't new. This wasn't some recent lapse. This had history. Familiarity. The kind of rhythm people fall into when they've already crossed every line and stopped pretending it's wrong. There was a mention of how she liked when he grabbed her waist while she pretended to clean the wine glasses. A joke about how clueless I was. Another about how she loved the way he looked at her when I was in the room. I kept taking photos. I didn't know how many. I didn't count. I just needed proof. I needed to preserve this moment, not because I didn't believe what I was seeing, but because I wanted her to see what I saw when the time came. When the lies ran out. When she tried to spin a story. I heard the sound of footsteps returning, light, carefree. I pressed the power button on the remote. The TV went black in an instant. I leaned back on the couch, dropped my phone on the side table, and exhaled softly. She walked in a second later, hair tied up, holding a mug of tea. She sat beside me again, asked if I wanted something to drink. I said I was fine. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I looked at her the same way I always did. She smiled and sipped from her cup, completely unaware that just minutes earlier, she had broadcast the truth to me with her own hands. I nodded along to whatever she was saying, something about a flower arrangement or a brunch date she wanted to host. She had no idea that everything was already in motion, that the screen had already shown me everything I needed to know. And I sat there with her, as I had so many nights before, pretending like nothing had changed. But everything had. After what I saw on the TV screen, everything changed, but only for me, not for her. She still walked through the house like nothing had shifted, humming while she folded laundry, lighting candles in the hallway like she always did in the evenings, smiling when she asked if I wanted anything from the grocery store. She still sat beside me on the couch with her feet tucked under a blanket, scrolling through those same videos on her phone, still occasionally casting them to the TV as if the last time never happened. I said nothing. I let her move through her day untouched by consequence. I didn't touch the topic, didn't hint at it. I never even glanced at her phone. I wanted her to feel safe, confident, comfortable in the lies she had built. Because only when liars feel completely protected do they reveal just how deep the deception goes. I said good morning like I always did. Said good night. Made coffee. Kissed her forehead. And every second I was near her, I was watching. Every word she said, every movement, every glance, it was all being collected, not for an argument, not for closure, but for understanding. Because I wanted to know exactly who she was when she thought no one was looking. She didn't treat the chef kindly. That was the first thing I really noticed once I started watching. In front of me, she acted cold, aloof. She made little comments about the way he plated things, about how slow he was getting the risotto right. She rolled her eyes when he described flavor notes or when he suggested a garnish. She talked to him like he was just a function of the kitchen, not a person. And the strange part was, I had always believed that. I'd seen her treat him that way so often that I assumed there was no warmth between them at all. No connection. But now I was seeing the cracks in that performance. Tiny cracks. Invisible to anyone not already looking for them. The way she passed by him just a little too closely when I stood across the room. The way she brushed a hair behind her ear as she asked him about something minor, like the butter temperature. The pause before she looked away after he spoke. Small things. Details that didn't matter on their own, but they weren't on their own anymore. Not to me. One afternoon, I was home early, quietly working in the sunroom while she was supposed to be in the dining area adjusting centerpieces for a lunch we were planning. I heard her talking to the chef. It wasn't flirtatious. It was clipped. Sharp. She scolded him for using the wrong cloth on the wine glasses. Said he needed to pay more attention to polish. Her voice was loud enough for me to hear. Then silence. And then, very faintly, she laughed. Just one small, low laugh. The kind of laugh you let slip when you forget someone might be listening. It wasn't playful or mocking. It was familiar. Intimate. A sound meant for someone you know very, very well. I stayed perfectly still. Didn't even shift in my chair. I just waited until the conversation ended, until her steps passed down the hallway again. When I walked into the dining room 20 minutes later, she was alone, adjusting a flower vase. She smiled when she saw me. Said she hoped I liked the arrangement. I told her it looked beautiful. From then on, I made sure I was present. Not loudly. Not obviously. Just close enough to see. I started standing in the kitchen longer than usual when the chef was plating. I'd compliment his seasoning. Ask about prep times. I watched her expression as I spoke to him. Neutral. Relaxed. Then I'd step out and loop back around quietly, watching from just out of view. Her expression would shift. Her posture too. She'd lean in slightly. Speak in a softer tone. Once I caught her biting her lower lip after he said something. I walked in then, pretending I'd forgotten my phone, and her face snapped back into that familiar cold mask. She criticized the garnish placement before turning away. And the chef? He didn't even flinch. He knew the game. I started noticing other things. She started dressing differently on the days he came. Nothing extreme. Just small changes. Subtle details. Lip gloss that wasn't there at breakfast. Earrings she never wore for errands. A tighter sweater. Her hair a little shinier. I caught her checking her reflection in the hallway mirror at 10:30 in the morning, long after we'd finished breakfast. Said she needed to make sure the lighting in the dining room was flattering for guests. There were no guests coming. Not that day. Just him. Just the man she pretended to barely tolerate. The one she kept at a distance in front of me but shared herself with behind my back. Once, I saw her walk past him with a towel in her hand, pretending to wipe a corner of the countertop that didn't need cleaning. He stepped aside for her, and her fingers brushed his wrist. Not intentionally, not aggressively, but gently, casually, like it was a motion they'd done before. She didn't flinch, didn't apologize, just kept moving. I waited for her to glance back at him. She didn't, but her smile lasted a second too long. All of this, I kept to myself. I didn't confront her. I didn't fire him. I didn't ask the cleaning lady questions. Not yet. I wasn't looking for rage. I was looking for the pattern, the full story. I wanted to see just how far she would go thinking I knew nothing. Because sometimes, when a person thinks they've gotten away with something, they get careless. They stop hiding. They lean too far forward. And all I had to do was stand quietly and wait for gravity to do the rest that I had been watching for weeks, maybe longer. By that point, it had become second nature, the way I stayed just long enough in doorways to see how she looked at him when she thought I wasn't looking, the way I took mental notes of the subtle differences in her appearance depending on the day and the time he arrived. The way she changed her tone mid-sentence when I walked into her room. It was all starting to build a picture so clear, so undeniable, that I no longer needed new proof. I just needed someone else who could see it too. Not because I wanted validation. Not because I was uncertain. But because when the time came, I didn't want to stand alone. There was one person in the house I trusted more than anyone else, and she had already been in the background through it all, quietly wiping surfaces and folding laundry while this lie unfolded in every corner of my home. The cleaning lady. Her name doesn't matter here, but her presence did. She had been with us longer than any chef, any house staff, even longer than our last dog. She had seen this household through renovations, guests, family holidays. She knew the sound of every door, the rhythm of every morning, the way the light changed in the hallway at noon. She was quiet, professional, loyal, and I knew she had seen more than she let on. One afternoon, I asked her to step into the study. I was careful, measured. I didn't speak with anger, didn't accuse anyone. I simply told her that I needed her help. She stood by the door with her hands clasped in front of her, her uniform still crisp, eyes calm but alert. I told her I had suspicions. I didn't say exactly what I'd seen. I didn't show her the screenshots. I didn't have to. Her eyes lowered slightly, not in guilt, in recognition. I asked if she had ever seen anything unusual between my wife and the chef. At first, she said nothing. Just stood there in that familiar stillness she always carried with her, the kind that made her invisible when she needed to be. I waited. No pressure. No threat. Just time. After a few moments, she shifted slightly, cleared her throat, and said she never wanted to get involved in things that weren't her place. I told her I understood. Then I asked her something else. I asked her to observe, not to spy, not to invade, but just to be present and tell me what she noticed when I wasn't home. Her expression didn't change. She simply nodded. Just once. That was all I needed. From that day forward, I paid attention to her movements more closely too. When I left for meetings, I watched where she stood, what room she gravitated toward. She became my eyes without ever needing to speak. And I could feel something shift in her behavior, not coldness, not judgment, but a quiet alliance. A woman who had spent years blending into the background was now focused, aware. Her routine never broke. She still polished the counters, folded the towels, emptied the bins. But I could see the difference in the way she looked around when they were both in the house. She was listening. She was watching. And I trusted her. Because in all her years with us, she had never once overstepped, never gossiped, never even hinted at drama. If she was going to tell me something, it would be because it mattered. Meanwhile, my wife continued performing. Her coldness toward the chef in my presence became even more exaggerated. She cut him off when he tried to explain a dish, criticized his presentation, scoffed at his dessert suggestion one evening, saying it was too old-fashioned. But there was a moment, small, almost forgettable, that stuck with me. I was standing at the edge of the kitchen, just out of her eye line, and I watched her pick up a spoonful of something he'd prepared and taste it. Her face lit up just a little, a genuine reaction. She smiled. Then, hearing my footsteps, she immediately rolled her eyes and muttered that it needed salt. It didn't. I tasted it after she left the room. It was perfect. But she needed to be seen criticizing him. She needed me to believe that nothing was going on, that she found him annoying, boring, below her. The chef, for his part, remained expressionless. If he knew what was happening behind the scenes, he didn't show it. He answered her coldness with professionalism. When I asked him questions, he was polite, efficient, never overly friendly, never too distant. It made him hard to read, but I didn't need to read him. I already had the proof. I had everything I needed. Now I just wanted context. And context would come not from him, not from her, but from the woman who had seen it all, day after day, while polishing silver and straightening curtains. That week, I made sure to schedule more time out of the house. Not suspiciously, not dramatically, just enough to create space. I told my wife I had a few lunch meetings, that I needed to run errands, that I wanted to give the staff breathing room to prepare for the upcoming brunch she was planning. She smiled and said it sounded like a good idea. I caught the chef glance up briefly when she said it. Then he returned to chopping herbs. I watched them both for just a second longer. Then I left. It wasn't long before she came to me. The cleaning lady. The one person in the house who had seen every silent detail unfold around her while pretending not to. She had waited until the timing was right, until I was alone, until the hallway was quiet and the clinking of glass and the humming of appliances couldn't be heard. It was a cool morning, 2 days before the brunch. I was in the office, sorting through a folder of invoices when she stepped inside and closed the door behind her without saying a word. That alone told me she was ready. She didn't stand like someone who was afraid. She stood like someone who had been holding something in for too long and finally decided she couldn't anymore. I didn't offer her a chair. She didn't ask. She simply stood across from me, hands folded gently, eyes calm, voice steady. She said she had seen things. Things she didn't want to believe. Things she thought would stop. Things that weren't her business, until I made them her business by asking her to observe. She began with the most recent incidents, as if easing into the weight of what she was about to reveal. She said they waited for me to leave. That as soon as my car pulled out of the driveway, the energy in the house changed. She said my wife would suddenly seem lighter, happier, even playful. Her tone softened. Her movement slowed. She would linger in the kitchen longer than needed. She would pretend to be deciding between wine glasses while the chef hovered just behind her. He didn't say much, but he didn't need to. She said the air between them was obvious, thick with something unspoken but lived in. The kind of comfort that doesn't come from flirtation, it comes from routine, from repetition, from muscle memory. She told me she'd seen my wife lean across the counter once and whisper something to him, then laugh as she walked away. That the chef looked down and smiled to himself like a man who had just been reminded of something that wasn't supposed to be said out loud. She said my wife had grazed his hand more than once while pretending to reach for a spoon. That once, in the pantry, she caught them standing closer than necessary. They weren't touching, but their bodies were aligned in a way that didn't belong in a professional kitchen. Another time, she walked into the dining room earlier than expected and found my wife sitting on the edge of the table while the chef stood near her, adjusting something on a serving tray. Neither of them moved quickly when they saw her. That was what struck her. They didn't act like they were caught. They acted like they didn't care anymore. She told me there were comments too. Not explicit, but suggestive. My wife saying things like, "You always make me feel spoiled," or "No one else knows my taste like you do." She said the chef never responded with words, but there were glances. Brief, confident, confirming. And it wasn't just the way they acted when alone. It was the shift. The transformation my wife made when I was home. How suddenly she'd snap back into the role of annoyed employer. How quickly she'd criticize his work, pick at his technique, dismiss his suggestions. The cleaning lady said it was like watching someone put on a costume. She knew the version of my wife that I saw, and she knew the one that came out when I left. I didn't say a word the entire time. I let her speak. Every detail confirmed what I had already seen in those texts. What I had suspected from the moment the TV screen lit up with their messages. I didn't need her to prove it. I needed her to witness it. To be there so that I knew I wasn't just imagining it all in a spiral of hurt. Her voice never wavered. She didn't look away. And when she finished, she asked me if I needed anything else. I told her thank you. That was all. After she left the room, I sat in silence for a long time. The sounds of the house slowly crept back in. A timer went off in the kitchen. A car drove past outside. The usual rhythm returned. But I didn't. I just stayed there, letting it settle. Everything I'd been collecting in my mind had now been spoken aloud by someone who had no reason to lie, no motive to fabricate, and every opportunity to remain silent. And she chose to tell the truth. She didn't embellish. She didn't editorialize. She just told me what she saw. The quiet hand touches. The closeness. The shifting tone. The dual identity my wife had built to live two lives under one roof. It was strange. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel like flipping a table or firing anyone on the spot. What I felt was colder than that. What I felt was final. Like standing in the last room of a house you're about to walk away from forever. I had built that house. Paid for it. Maintained it. Loved it. But now I could see the cracks in the foundation, and I knew they weren't new. They had been there for a long time. I had just stopped looking. Later that afternoon, I saw my wife laughing over color swatches for the brunch centerpiece. She called the chef over and asked which napkin looked more elegant. She didn't touch him. She didn't flirt. She barely acknowledged him after he answered. But I watched the way her eyes moved when he walked away. I watched the tension in her shoulders drop. The same act. The same performance. And I smiled. Not because I forgave her. Not because I pitied her. But because I knew what she didn't. She thought she still had control. It started with a single line. Just one offhand remark over breakfast about how she wanted to host something soon. Something elegant, but intimate. A brunch, she said. Just a gathering of familiar faces. Nothing too extravagant, of course. Just the right kind of curated. The right kind of personal. She said it like it was a new idea, something spontaneous, but the way she already had a list of guests in her phone told me it had been planned for weeks. Maybe longer. She wanted to celebrate, she claimed. Celebrate life, love, partnership. A thank you to the people who supported us. But every choice she made said something else. The brunch wasn't for gratitude. It was for image. The image of a woman in control. A woman with taste, charm, class. A woman with the perfect home, the perfect guest list, and the perfect husband at her side. She started with the menu. She said she wanted something seasonal but elevated. She said the chef should handle everything, insisted on it. Said no one else could interpret her palate quite like he could. That word, interpret, hung in the air. I told her that sounded perfect. She smiled, already picturing herself in the center of it all. Next came the layout. She walked the house like a set designer, pointing at furniture that needed to be moved, adjusting curtains for lighting, mapping out where the drink station would go. She fussed over the position of the dining chairs, measured the length of the flower boxes. She booked the florist herself, told me she didn't trust the assistant with color coordination. She wanted everything to feel fresh, classic, high touch. I told her it would. She moved on to the guest list, rattling off names with surgical precision. Couples we'd hosted before. A few of my colleagues from the firm. Her sister, of course. The neighbor who'd helped install the trellis out back. Even a sommelier she once met at an art event who she claimed would elevate the room. I didn't object. I let her build her guest list like a blueprint. Every person chosen for their reaction, their place in the performance. She wanted the kind of crowd that wouldn't just enjoy the event, but would talk about it later. The kind that would repost her centerpieces and tag her in compliments. She chose ivory napkins, antique silverware, water glasses with ridged edges that shimmered in the light. She insisted we steam the garden chairs even though no one had sat outside in months. I watched her spiral into the details like a director obsessing over the final cut of her favorite film. The cleaner helped quietly, nodding when asked, adjusting when told. She had seen this kind of energy before, but never quite like this. The chef came and went during those prep days, always silent, always professional, moving in and out of the kitchen like a man deep in thought. My wife barely acknowledged him around me, gave him notes with a tone of distance, asked questions about courses without eye contact. But I saw the flickers, the moments where her voice softened, the way she tilted her head just slightly when he responded, the glances when she thought I was looking away. She played it cool, detached, just like always. She thought I still believed the mask, and I let her. I watched her correct the plate heights with a laser level, watched her run her hands along table runners she reordered 3 times until she found the right stitching. She told me once, while fluffing throw pillows, that the vibe needed to feel effortless, even if it wasn't. That was the point, she said. The best events feel like no one tried too hard, even when every detail is controlled. She was controlling everything. I let her. She spent an hour choosing music, arguing with herself between instrumental jazz and acoustic covers of vintage hits. She chose the latter, said it would feel lighter. She tried on 3 dresses in the mirror, spinning in each one to check the neckline and natural light. She finally chose a soft ivory wrap dress, the kind with delicate seams and an open collar. She said it felt timeless. She started doing her hair trials 2 days early, not because she needed to, but because she wanted the staff to see her in her element, poised, put together, untouchable. She called the lighting company to ask about dimmers. She even emailed a local bakery for a cake that wasn't technically on the menu, just in case, she said. Just in case someone asked about dessert. I watched it all with the patience of someone who had already read the final page. Every ribbon tied, every glass polished, every table rearranged, it was all part of the same perfect illusion. And she thought it was working. She thought she was the director of this moment, that she was writing a story everyone else would read. She thought the meal would be the main course. But it wouldn't be. The main course was coming, and it wouldn't be served on a plate. It would be shown on a screen. I let her set every detail, every chair, every vase. Because this time, the room wouldn't remember the flavor of the salad or the floral notes in the wine. It would remember what it felt like when the curtain dropped. The morning of the party came dressed in sunlight, soft and golden, like even the sky wanted to cooperate with her vision of perfection. The house felt staged, like a showroom, every corner fluffed and polished, the scent of citrus polish blending with fresh-cut flowers from the florist she had ordered with special instructions on petal spacing. Her energy was glowing, effervescent, the kind of buzz that came from believing everything was finally falling into place. She wore that ivory dress, the one she had twirled in days before when she thought no one was watching. Her hair was styled the way she liked for social events, soft waves pinned back just enough to look effortless. She moved around the house like a hostess with a crown, issuing instructions with a smile, complimenting the staff, asking if the music felt too loud or too mellow. She told me she was proud of us, proud of what we had built, proud of the life we were presenting today. I nodded, kissed her cheek, told her everything looked perfect. She beamed. The chef was already in the kitchen, focused and quiet, dressed crisp and white, his apron tied tight, sleeves rolled precisely. He avoided eye contact. I let him. Guests arrived slowly, in pairs and waves, all dressed in muted tones and subtle elegance. The kind of crowd that knew how to compliment without exaggeration, how to admire without sounding impressed. Her sister arrived first, hugging her tightly, laughing with a familiarity that had survived childhood fights and whispered judgments. Then came my business partner and his wife, then an old family friend who brought an artisanal jam as a gift. Every arrival brought another perfectly placed smile from her, another wave of laughter that floated across the room like perfume. She introduced people like a queen assigning titles, made connections between guests with little inside jokes and humble brags disguised as anecdotes. The house filled with the gentle rhythm of clinking glasses and murmured approval. People complimented the wine, the table settings, the lighting, her hosting, and especially the food. The chef had prepared everything exactly as she envisioned, perfectly plated portions, garnishes that caught the light, flavors that played to memory and presentation. When the first round of small plates came out, people paused to admire before taking their first bite. That was her favorite moment. The pause. The admiration. She stood near the table, pretending not to wait for it. But I saw how her eyes scanned the faces of each guest, soaking up every glance of approval, every closed eye savoring, every nod that said she had done it again. She leaned into one guest and whispered that this was all him, gesturing vaguely toward the kitchen. But it wasn't humility. It was ownership disguised as credit-giving. And the chef, who had once stood tall behind his work, now moved with the stiffness of a man who knew the knife wasn't in the drawer, it was already halfway through his back. She raised a glass halfway through the meal and gave her little speech. Thanked everyone for being part of our lives. Said that she felt so lucky, so supported, so grateful. That love and trust were the foundation of every beautiful thing. Her voice didn't crack. Her eyes didn't flicker. If she had any idea what was coming, she didn't show it. She was still in character, still performing. And when she looked at me and said she couldn't have done any of this without me, the room followed her gaze, all eyes landing on me, smiling. I stood, smiled back, tapped my glass gently. The room quieted the way well-trained rooms do, not suddenly, but with intention. A few last sips, a final whisper, then silence. I thanked them for coming, said I was honored to host them, said I had one final thing to share. Something personal, something honest. I took my phone from my pocket and walked slowly to the TV mounted above the console, sleek, unassuming, the same one that had once revealed everything without a word. I tapped once, cast the screen, and the air shifted. Her phone appeared, not her home screen, not a photo album. The message thread, the one with his name at the top, the chef's. The first image was a screenshot of a message, then another. Line after line of flirtation, invitation, Confessions that had nothing to do with ingredients or menus. Her words, not mine. Her phrases. Her little inside jokes. Her mirror selfies and suggestive poses. The timestamp from a morning I remembered well, when she told me she had a headache and needed to stay in bed. I didn't narrate. I didn't explain. I let the images play, and the silence stretched. One guest shifted in their seat. Another coughed into their napkin. Her sister froze, her wine glass halfway to her mouth. I didn't turn to look at my wife until the third or fourth image. When I did, her mouth was open slightly. Not in horror. Not yet. In disbelief. Like a woman who couldn't understand how the curtains had been pulled back so far, so fast. The chef had stopped moving. His hands were clenched at his sides. He didn't breathe. I looked back at the room, then at her. And I said, if you're going to rehearse a perfect brunch, maybe don't rehearse your affair in the same house. Especially not on the same screen. I turned to the chef next, looked him in the eye, and said he was done. Not just here. Everywhere. He didn't argue. Just walked out. A few guests stood. Some sat frozen. Her sister whispered her name, but she didn't answer. I walked to the edge of the table, removed my ring, and set it beside the glass bowl she had filled with sliced oranges and floating blossoms. Then I thanked everyone for their time. Told them they were welcome to stay and eat. The food, after all, was still excellent. I walked out the front door. The sound of clinking cutlery didn't follow me. Was his food really so delicious that she was willing to lose her husband for it?